Oh, this is Wade Borth with Wade Borth Podcast. So today we're going to talk about what is infinite banking. What's the idea of controlling the banking function in your life? I teach agents and I teach clients this each and every day. This is my passion, to help people understand how to take control of their banking function in their lives. And so I get a lot of people say, what is that? What does that mean? So one of the very first things I have them do is read a book by Nelson Nash called Becoming Your Own Banker, the Infinite Banking Concept. And it's a thought process where we take control of the banking functions in our lives, and how that happens and why that makes sense is what you'll learn in that book. And then once you've had a chance to read that book and understand it, or at least to have a chance to read it, I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. But just in general, let's talk a little bit about what the infinite banking concept is. And I have a great way to explain this by the use of some observation that I had with my son, Josh, and taking a walk through nature, just to describe what or how the infinite banking concepts work. Because again, it's just the idea that how we think about money has been conditioned into us. It's been beat into us that there's only certain ways that we can use our money, and only certain ways that we can have access to dollars, and what we should do with our money. How many billions of dollars are spent by Wall Street, and I look at my cable and how many channels are designated to the whole idea that the only place to put your money is Wall Street. Again, if you're in the same thought process as I am about taking control of your money, being responsible for your dollars in your future versus letting somebody else be responsible for that. And when it doesn't work out, you're mad, of course, but why not you take control of that concept? Again, Nelson's book was called Becoming Your Own Banker, not Wade becoming your banker, but becoming your own banker. And what did he call it? His thought process was, we finance everything we do. And I'm a believer in that. Either you give up interest or you pay up interest. But that's a discussion for another day. I'd encourage you to read that book, reach out to us, and we can have a discussion about that. But again, if you either want to teach it to other people or you want to implement the process yourself, I encourage you to read the book, reach out to me, and we can have that discussion. But in this podcast today, we're going to talk about the infinite banking concept, and we're going to give it an illustrative thought about how this process really works. So this happened a couple of years ago, and I wrote about it on our blog at sagewellstrategy.com. There's a blog called The Infinite Banking Concept. It's explained by nature. And so Josh and I were taking our yellow lab, Sky, out for a walk one day, and it was in the spring, just like it is right now. And we're out walking, and that year we had a lot of snow, and there's a lot of runoff and a lot of water running down our ditches because we don't live in a city that has curb and gutter with the underground sewer system. We could see the water flowing down our ditches. And I found it rather interesting. And so I asked Josh, I said, look at the retention pond that the city built behind our house. And I was trying to get it because he was asking me, he said, Dad, what is it that you do? Help me explain. Now, this is from a 12-year-old. So I'm sitting and go, how do I explain this to a 12-year-old? And I remember something that Nelson told me. He says, this is simple unless you make it complicated. So I'm like, I should be able to explain this to my 12-year-old son really relatively easy then. And one of the things that Nelson writes about in his book is the money's like water. And so as I was watching this water flow down the ditch, I'm like, I have the perfect example for him today. What did I do? I said, so look at the water. I said, where does the water have the most power? And he took a moment, and his observation was, well, running downhill, because we're at a spot on our walk where the water was coming out of one ditch, coming into a bigger ditch, but it had eroded away a good chunk of the neighbor's yard because the water kept running into this bigger ditch. And I said, yeah. I said, so think bigger than that. When does water have power? And he says, yeah, if it sits behind a dam and turns a turbine. That wasn't exactly what he said. He says it creates electricity if it goes through the hydroelectric dams. I said, that's exactly right. Or think back in the day when settlers came here, they would find a stream so they could turn a mill. So flowing water has power. I said, now look back where the city has the retention pond behind their house. They built a retention pond for the runoff to hold some water. And a lot of times they don't drain it. It just sits there. I said, so what happens when water sits? He says, it gets green, it stinks, and it evaporates. I'm like, that's exactly right. So now let's take that in the context of money. So let's take the retention pond with the idea that, hey, I'm going to save money. I'm going to store money. I'm going to have this scarcity mindset and I'm going to hoard my money. What does that do? And he says, well, if the water sits in the pond, again, this is coming from a 12-year-old. He had great reasoning skills. He goes, if it sits in the pond, it's just going to evaporate. It's going to turn stinky and it's going to turn green. I said, well, that's exactly right. So think about that from your money standpoint. Your money being held and stored and held onto for, so hard, what typically happens with it? The three wealth destroyers kind of have an effect on it. It becomes stagnant by inflation. It's eaten up. It's evaporated by taxes and fees as it sits there. So think about your money as is being stored in this big retention pond. You've been conditioned to think, take your money to the bank, put your money in a savings account. That's what you need to do. Yes. Yep. That's what you need to do. Put your money in a savings account. So they tell you to store this. They tell you to put your money in this big retention pond called the bank. But what does the bank do with it? Think about this. What does a bank do with those dollars that are deposited in those savings accounts? Do they store it? Heck no. They don't store it. They let it flow. They put it into motion. They don't teach you that. What I try to get across to clients, what I try to get across to agents that I'm mentoring and teaching about this whole idea and this whole concept is, don't let money be stored. Look at what banks do. Look what people of wealth do. Do they store money? Banks, if they take in $1, if they take in $1 or $100 deposit into a savings account, they don't store that in a vault somewhere. They turn around and they lend it out for way more than what they're paying for to store it. That's called velocity of money, right? They pay $1 on that $100 bill for interest, and they turn around and they make 5, 8, 10 credit card companies make 20%, whatever it is. They put it to work. And they create tremendous cash flow. Why do you think you see a bank on every street corner of your city or your town that you live in? Why aren't we conditioned to think, say, hey, why are banks doing that? Let's emulate some of the things that banks do. I wrote a blog that says you need to love yourself more than you love Wells Fargo. And I truly mean that. You need to love your family more than you need to love Wells Fargo, because we have to act more like the bank. Now, I'm not saying own that bank. I'm just saying the actions we take with our money have to emulate those that are making money. Why not do that? Why recreate the wheel? This idea is already out there. And the current banking system is using it multiple times in every dollar, but that's a whole other discussion. But the idea is that when we take our money, yeah, we can store it, and maybe we need some storage. I'm not saying we don't need some retention ponds, but don't let it sit there forever. Because we want to be able to take advantage of opportunities. We want to be able to weather chaos. If 2020 taught us nothing, it's how do we weather chaos? How do we take advantage of opportunities? Just because it was chaotic for some doesn't mean there wasn't opportunities for others. So yeah, we do need to have some storage for that. I'm a firm believer in that. But what we do with it, once we store it, is now what are we doing to put it in motion? So the example with the water flowing is just like money, or just like water, money needs to flow. And what I mean by that is, what can I be putting my money in? Where can I flow my money to so it can create a cash flow back to me? Again, this is the same idea that Wells Fargo and all the other banks out there, Bank of America, they already know this. And it's no big secret. They don't take their money and they don't put it in Wall Street. No. What do? They put it in reserves. They put it in properly structured life insurance. They put it in safe, secure, guaranteed accounts. So when they need it to put it into motion, it's there to take advantage of opportunities. So why haven't we been conditioned to think the same way? What's wrong with taking advantage of opportunities when they arise? Because it is a process of how you think about money. And when we put it into motion, we have to make sure that it gets a return on it. We have to treat our money better than Wells Fargo treats our money. But our actions, more often than not, do not reflect that. We treat our money way worse than anybody else would treat our money, that we would make other people treat our money. So again, that's detailed a little bit more in Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. But when we do put it in motion, when we do save it up, what are we doing to put it in motion? How is that money flowing downhill? Is it going to hit ripples? Is it going to take a while before it hits a place where it can generate income? Probably so. More than likely so. It's not all 100% roses. It's, again, having this long-term thought process about, it isn't about one event. It's about an entire process over a lifetime. It's unlearning what you've learned about storing money and wealth and cash flow, and relearning to think, hey, I can think like people that have wealth, or they can think like the banks. I have money that I can reserve, I can save, and then what am I doing to put it in motion? Versus putting it in that retention pond behind my house just so it could evaporate because of inflation and taxes and fees. The banks want you, Wall Street wants you to think that way, because who makes the most return? Who makes the most money of money that goes to Wall Street? The money managers and the brokers and the people that run the process. Again, you're playing in their game. They make the rules up and they change the rules whenever they want. And some people think that they can get into that game and win at that game. And maybe they can. But can they do it on a consistent long-term basis versus having control of your dollars by having sound ideas that you can say, hey, if something doesn't turn out, or I have an opportunity to take advantage of an opportunity, what am I doing? What have I done in preparation for that? So again, it's just about how we think, and then just the idea of money, of water flowing down the ditch. I spurred this with my son and having that conversation, and understanding that money is a lot like water in the sense that it does have it is most powerful when it's flowing downhill. Look at the Colorado River. Has it cut nearly as deep since it's been dammed up and it's been stored? It's changed. It changes now to electricity because they dam that up and they hold it. They change it to electricity, but it's still creating energy. But if you live near a swamp somewhere, that's probably the best example I can give you of what your water and storage might look like. It'll start to stink after a while. You get restless. You find very little value in it. I mean, that's another issue altogether, is what value do we see in our money? If we don't see our money producing and generating income for us and doing all the things we want it to do, we start to look at it and say, this has very little value. So therefore, we're willing to give it away. Who do we give it away to? We give it away to the banks. We give it away to Wall Street. I'll put a little bit of money. I don't care if I'm going to throw some money in this penny stock and we'll see what happens. I can afford to lose it. What kind of thought process is that? The reason why that is so prevalent in everybody's mind right now is because we've been just conditioned to think that our cash on hand has very little value. So what are we doing to find more value for that cash? But again, everybody believes that cash has very little value because it doesn't do anything for us. It hasn't done anything for us for years. Yeah, it's because we haven't been taught. We haven't been invited to think. We haven't. Again, one of my founding principles is to empower you to take control of that banking function in your life. And once all the weeds in your garden, in the garden in your head, have been pulled and weeded out of your garden, then that process can truly grow. The knowledge is within all of us to do that. It's already there. And if you can think long term and allow me to empower you to take control of that banking function in your life, then the possibilities are endless. But as of right now, we've been conditioned to put our money in the storage pond. We haven't been encouraged to imagine what other possibilities of water flowing downhill could do for us. How much power, how much energy could be generated by that? Who knows? Because the possibilities are limitless, but we haven't even allowed ourselves to imagine what that might look like. Because again, we've been conditioned to think that our cash has very little value. And then with that conditioning, we're willing to give it away for free so other people can go make money off of it. Other people can find wealth from our money versus you finding wealth with your money. You can reach out to us, go on to sagewealthstrategy.com. If you disagree, I'd love to hear that as well. If you agree, love to hear that as well too. Send me an email.